Everyone, and welcome back to our study of Paul's letter to the Romans. We have a lot to unpack and get through today as well, just like last time, so I'm going to move right into it. If you would please read verses 13 to 15. We're breaking up the lesson again today, so read chapter 4, verses 13 through 15, which is in the description section below, pausing the video. And now I'm going to move into the questions. How does faith in God and faith in Jesus make things right in a practical, not always abstract sense? So we tend to want to speak theologically about how this works, and that's well and good and important. But we also need to think practically about how faith in God and Jesus makes things right in us, in our relationships, and in our world. So faith in God and Jesus, first of all, leads us to acknowledge that judgment is a reality, that there is right and wrong, that there is good and bad, and that we need to pay attention to the voice of God inside our heads, calling us deeper and deeper into righteousness. Faith in God and Jesus tell us that we're not going to be able to do this perfectly. Those around Jesus didn't, not even his disciples, and yet there was Jesus always ready to forgive and continually love them. So faith in God and Jesus teaches us that as well, and that's important for our relationships. Our relationships get messed up time and again as well, and when we have faith in Jesus, it says that we need to, number one, repent. When we do make mistakes towards those we love or others around us, we need to be ready to forgive others when they sin against us as well, and that lays the foundation for righteousness to rise up in our relationships time and again. Faith in God and Jesus gives us hope and allows us to persevere in goodness despite the trials of life. We all go through very, very difficult times, and hope is absolutely critical. And so there's all kinds of other things that we could talk about in terms of the importance of faith, in terms of practically making things right in our life and in our world. I mean, I think that faith in God involves faith in the powers and principalities of love and justice and goodness. And so a living faith in these heavenly powers and principles empowers us to commit our lives to these things. And that, of course, is critical to righteousness rising up in ourselves, our relationship, and our world. Question 2. Have we seen Jews even move beyond adherence to the Old Testament law as the means of making things right? I'm just wanting to bring up here how both Reform and Conservative Judaism, I know less about Orthodox Judaism, but certainly Reform and Conservative Judaism are living spiritual traditions, and they are constantly debating the law, constantly moving beyond the Old Testament law in terms of interpretations, constantly being guided by the Spirit of God, who is faithful to our Jewish brothers and sisters. And so just as Paul was moving beyond the Old Testament law when it came to Jews and Gentiles, so still today our Jewish brothers and sisters are not stuck in a strict adherence to a law that goes back 2,500 years. Question 3, what promise is being alluded to? The promise that is alluded to in verse 13 is the promise to Abraham that God would bless him with offspring as numerous as the stars. He would be blessed in other ways. Those offspring of his would be blessed, and they would be a blessing to the world. So that is what God promises Abraham as he covenants with him. Question 4, how does the Old Testament law bring wrath to Gentiles? It would condemn the Gentiles by putting a huge hurdle up to them being a part of covenant community with the God of Israel and with the people of Israel. And so that's why Paul says, no, we cannot have this barrier between Jews and Gentiles. The Old Testament law is no longer in place in many regards, including circumcision and dietary restrictions, which were two of the major hurdles to Gentiles joining the covenant community in the worship of the God of Israel. Question 5, where there is no law, there is no wrath regarding what? There's no wrath, where there's no civil or Jewish law, there's no wrath with regards, there's no punishment, there's no violation. If we didn't have a law about stopping at traffic lights, there wouldn't be a violation if you ran a red light. But of course, it would still be wrong. And so we still have to pay attention to the law written upon our hearts. I think that anybody who continually ignores the law of God's love written on their hearts, that they will indeed be judged according to their deeds, as Paul says. He says, no one has an excuse. And so we need to continually pay attention to God's Spirit speaking to our hearts and minds, and continually grow in righteousness. So stop and read verses 16 to 21, please. Pause the video and read verses 16 to 21. Continuing in the question 6, who is Abraham the father of? Here we hear that Abraham is the father of all the nations of the world and all the peoples of the world. The question then becomes for all of us, will we acknowledge that we have one ancestor in Adam and Eve, if we understand the biblical story literally, or the same ancestors from Africa, if we believe in evolution? We all come from the same source. We all have the same original father and mother in Adam and Eve. We have the same covenantal father in Abraham. So are we going to live together as one human family? I'm going to challenge you time and again to understand every person in the world as being a brother and a sister.